strategic initiatives here in Baltimore County. And among the strategic initiatives we launched in the last few years was our ability to give out grants such as these. And this is our American Rescue Plan Nonprofit Recovery Grant Program that we launched a few days ago. And this webinar will give as deep and detailed an overview of what will be required for applications as we can possibly share. It's very exciting. This is one of our first American Rescue Plan grant opportunities. We do expect to have others in the future, but this is the first one, and we're very grateful that all of you have tuned in this afternoon. I'd like to introduce our two other presenters who will really be managing much of this next 2 hours. Ashley Meyer is our Baltimore County Grants Coordinator. For many of you have worked with her. I recognize a number of nonprofit leaders on this call that have received funding from us, particularly in the last 2 years as part of our COVID response. And Gabby Slocum is our grants assistant. She and Ashley work closely together, and I'm sure many of you have worked with her as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I do want to add that we are recording this, so if you have colleagues who could not attend, we will be posting this webinar in the coming days on the our American Rescue Plan website under, I believe it'll be under the grants section, but it shouldn't be hard to find. So thank you all, and I'd like to turn it over to Ashley Meyer.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as she said, I'm Ashley Meyer. I'm the grants coordinator for Baltimore County. I'm going to go ahead and walk us through some slides with for the grant program so we can talk about everything that's required, the background and overview of this funding stream. And then we will open it up at the end to Q&A. So I hope we don't need, the full 2 hours. I'm sure everyone has other things they'd rather be doing, but I wanted to just make sure we had as much time as possible for questions. If you have a question that, comes to your mind as I'm going through the slides, please feel free to put it in the chat. Once we get to Q&A, we'll take questions. I will do my best to unmute everyone so that we can take questions out loud, and we'll go through the ones that are in the chat. We'll try and answer everything. And based off of the conversations we have today, if there are things that come up that we weren't able to address in the moment, we will be revising and updating our FAQs on our webpage to reflect any new information that was brought up today. So everything will be available on our ARP grants page, and I put that link in the chat. I will probably put it in the chat again as we go through all the different questions, and where the information to register for this once will be replaced with feel free to download a copy of these slides or review the recording of the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So as Elizabeth said, this is our first grant that we are making available with our American Rescue Plan Act funds. These are federal funds from the federal government to jurisdictions to assist, with the response to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Baltimore County has given out 2 other rounds of COVID-19 nonprofit funding. The first round was in 2020, which many of you may be familiar with. We received a lot of philanthropic funds from different philanthropic institutions around the area. And so we were able to make a small amount of grants to nonprofits in 2020 to assist with the COVID-19 response. And then in 2021, we were able to receive some funds from the state of Maryland's Department of Housing and Community Development, specifically for nonprofits to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this year we have received the federal funds, the ARPA funds, to do the same thing. So we have done this now twice. This is our 3rd round of COVID funding. However, each round, the money comes from a different place and Baltimore County administers it. So there are different rules and different requirements for each round. So we'll walk through what those are for this year, in a moment. So the total pot available at this time is $1.3 million of our ARPA funds for the nonprofit grant making. We are working with the Baltimore Community Foundation. They host our COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund, which is what we have used to administer our previous 2 rounds of nonprofit grants. The priority areas for the county for this particular grant include projects that respond to the COVID-19 public health emergency for immigrant communities in Baltimore County, within the Essex community in Baltimore County, for any communities of Baltimore County. The reason we wanted to highlight some of those other groups is because we are just taking a very special look at some different priority areas in the county, both geographical and demographical. So we wanted to just highlight that those are areas of interest to us as we make grants with this money. The minimum grant request is $25,000 a project. So if you are going to apply, you can submit up to 3 projects in one application and a minimum request of $25,000 per project. So if you submit 1 project, $25,000. If you submit 2, 25 per each, so on and so forth. You are welcome to ask for more, but the minimum grant request is 25 and there's no maximum. The funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and they have to be spent by December 31st, 2026. So these are requirements that come to us from the United States Treasury, which is where we are taking all of our guidance from for administering these ARPA funds. These are requirements of the federal government. They are not just our requirements. So when we say obligated, what we mean is that by the end of 2024, you need to have stated what you will be using the funds for if you have any left. And then they must be spent by the end of 2026. So everything that doesn't get spent has to come back to us so we can give it back to the federal government. That is just a ARPA rule from the Treasury. Everybody has to comply with it in every jurisdiction. So that's why we are taking such a stringent look and have a 2-step process with this application process, is because there are a lot of rules and regulations. All the money's got to go back to the Fed. So we want to make sure that we are being as thorough as possible, so that you can be as thorough as possible, so nobody has to give any money back. So the projects that are eligible for this grant, projects must remedy the COVID-19 public health emergency, and they can be direct or indirect. So a direct project would be something like, setting up a mobile vaccination clinic. That's probably the best one. And then like an indirect project may be something like, an after-school program so that people can return to work and have childcare. So the direct projects have to respond directly to the COVID-19 public health emergency. Indirect projects can address some of those issues that are attributable to the COVID-19 public health emergency, but maybe have some other causes as well. So again, some examples may be a food pantry in your community, after school childcare, some sort of job skills training, things that you can explain that the COVID-19 pandemic impacted, but may also have some other impacts. We are also considering some very specific capital projects as eligible for this money. So and there is U.S. Treasury guidance, which I will pull up at the end of the presentation. If you are interested, I can show you where to find where the federal government describes what capital projects are eligible to the federal government. For this process, it must be like directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, building more clinic space if you are a clinic that is administering vaccines, maybe expanding your food pantry if you are setting up a food pantry for your community and you need more freezer space. So, those are some examples of capital projects that may be eligible for this money with this process. So this is a competitive grant. All of the applications will be scored and the funds will go to the highest scoring proposals across the county. This is not a first come, first serve. So if you submit your application on day 1 versus the last day of when it can be submitted, You are no more or less eligible than anyone else. We will be looking at all of these once they've all come in, and we will be scoring them based on, the sum of what we see. You do not have to be located in Baltimore County to be eligible. So this is available to all nonprofits that serve residents of Baltimore County. So if you are an organization that's located in the city or in Harford County, but your project that you are submitting for this process serves residents of Baltimore County, it may be eligible. This is a two-step process. So you may have seen, if you've already looked at our website, looked at our press release, we have a pre-proposal questionnaire, and then there will be a full application. So the pre-proposal questionnaire, you can currently submit one now. We have received some. They are due by July 25th at 5 p.m. That's a Friday. And then we will be reviewing all of the pre-proposal questionnaires and supplemental information to determine eligibility. Those that are eligible will receive an invitation to submit a full application through the Baltimore Community Foundation. So they are a partner in this process. They will be handling the portal, the application portal, and they will notify you if you are eligible to submit a full application. July 25th is a Monday, excuse me. Everybody who submits a pre-proposal will be notified one way or the other. So if you are not deemed eligible to submit a full application, we will reach out to you and let you know. We aren't going to leave anyone hanging. And then the awards themselves will be announced in November. So everyone has about, a month to get in a pre-proposal, and then there will be about another month to submit a full application to BCF. So you must be a nonprofit organization with a 501c3 status, or you can use a fiscal sponsor with a 501c3 status. In order to submit a pre-proposal questionnaire to the county. I'm going to walk through some of the threshold eligibility that we're looking for. So again, you need to be a designated nonprofit 501c3 by the IRS. So you will need to provide that IRS determination letter of nonprofit status. You will need a DUNS number, or now they are calling it a unique entity identifier. So I will, show you in a few slides where you can go to look for that. You must be in good standing with the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation. You have to show in your pre-proposal questionnaire that you intend to provide services to residents of Baltimore County. And you have to identify a negative impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency. So again, we want to make sure that you are a nonprofit, you are in good standing, you're going to serve residents of Baltimore County, you're going to do so by identifying a negative impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency, and how your project is going to respond to the negative impacts of the COVID-19 public health emergency. And then we're looking to see that you, as an organization, have the capacity, skill, and internal controls to administer these funds appropriately. So what that means is, again, as I've mentioned, these are federal funds, and they come with a lot of rules and regulations for how they can be used. And Baltimore County, has to comply with all those rules and regulations. And as we, grant out these funds to nonprofits for this process, by accepting the award, you are also bound to all of those rules and regulations for these federal dollars. And so what we want to do with this pre-proposal questionnaire is basically double check that based on your answers and the information you provide, that your organization would be capable of handling the very robust reporting requirements, because there will be ongoing reporting of how you use this money. That you have the structure in place to make sure that funds get spent on time and in the way that they're intended to be spent. So we are looking for this step one to make sure that you have all of the basic stuff down, but that you also can demonstrate that you would be able to comply with all of those rules and regulations from the federal government. And that is, that's because at the end of the day, if something were to, not pass muster with the federal government, your organization would have to give back the money and perhaps have to do something else. So we want to make sure that, you're not in that situation, and that we as the county are not in that situation either. So again, as I said, the materials that you'll need to submit with the pre-proposal are the questionnaire, your IRS determination letter of nonprofit status, an online verification of your certificate of good standing, and we're going to need 2019 through year-to-date financials. And that is because in order to be eligible for this money, you had to have been in operation prior to the start of the pandemic. So your organization needed to be operational on March 12th of 2019 in order to be eligible. So if your nonprofit was started in 2021, you are unfortunately not eligible, and that is a federal rule, not just a Baltimore County rule. So this is what we are looking for when we're talking about your certificate of good standing. So you're welcome to scan in and submit a copy of the actual certificate you get from the state. We will happily accept this screenshot. So if you go to SDOT's website and you put in your information and this comes up, you are welcome to just take a screenshot of this and then send this, and this will work just fine as your certificate of good standing. For your DUNS number, all you need to do, and there is information in the pre-proposal questionnaire that will direct you to this website. You go to sam.gov, government website, and if you don't already have your DUNS number or your UEI available, this is where you would go to look it up or apply for one. So in the pre-proposal questionnaire, we're obviously going to ask you for your, basic organization name, the individual who is applying on behalf of the organization, their contact information. But we're also going to be asking you some of the following questions. So, we want to know that you have the appropriate financial and management controls in place. Have you ever received a federal award? That is because for all intents and purposes, this is a federal award. It's federal money that is coming through Baltimore County. So we want to make sure that your organization is familiar with the complexities of receiving a federal grant award. Has your organization ever been delinquent in submitting grant reporting? Has your organization ever had to return all or a portion of an award? And again, were you operational at least 1 year prior to the pandemic? So these are all yes/no questions with the space to explain. So if you were ever delinquent in submitting a grant report, there is a space to sort of explain what happened. And I want to just take a minute to encourage everyone to answer these questions truthfully and provide any detail, because an automatic, if let's say your organization was delinquent one time in submitting a grant report, and you say no, you say yes, you have been, that's not an automatic disqualifier. We are giving you a place to sort of explain what happened. Sometimes things happen where like an email didn't get sent, got caught up in cyberspace. That's one thing. So what we're looking for is we need everyone to be detailed and honest so that we can, double check all of this information so that we can make that determination that yes, you are eligible to submit a full application, or no, you're not eligible at this time. And then we are going to ask just 1 or 2 questions about your proposed project. So we want to know how many projects you are submitting, so 1, 2, or 3. We want you to identify, in just a few words, what it is that about the COVID-19 pandemic that you are looking to address with your project. So if you are submitting more than 1 project, you will need to specify for each. And then we ask a lot of other questions like the ones you see in front of you. So, are your projects going to serve low-income households or communities? Are they going to serve households residing in qualified census tracts? Do they serve households that qualify for benefits like SNAP or WIC or anything like that? And these are questions that need to be answered for the U.S. Treasury. So the U.S. Treasury specifies that these funds, we need to identify how ARPA is being used for these communities and these households. So we are asking you, to identify that. If you need help figuring out if your project takes place in a qualified census tract, you can go to HUD's website, hud.gov, I believe it is. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. or you can ask us, hey, I'm having trouble figuring this out. We can point you in the right direction. But these are all things that we need to know so that we can, when we submit our reports to the federal government about how we're using our ARPA funds, we can say, this many nonprofits received funds to assist, low-income households and communities in Baltimore County. So once you submit your pre-proposal questionnaire with your supporting materials, that again is due to us July 25th, we will screen them all for eligibility, and then we will notify BCF who will be invited to get a link to an application, and then we will notify those who are not going to be invited to submit a full application. The applications are due September 2nd by 5 p.m. Again, you can request funding for up to 3 different projects in your one application. So you will only need to fill out one application, and you will just need to provide the information for each project in your application. So again, we're going to, look for some of the basic stuff, your organization's mission statement, vision statement, values, your organization's activities. So we want to know if you, as a nonprofit, what are some of the things that your organization does? We also need to know about your COVID-19 financial support. So, did you receive a PPP loan? Did you receive a COVID-19 grant from the county? Did you receive, state funding? How much money did you receive from each of those sources? And, identify any gaps in funding. So if you received, let's just say you received $1 million PPP loan, identify any gaps where that only went so far for what you needed to accomplish. We're also going to need Baltimore County financial support, not just COVID. So within the past 3 years, have you received any financial support from the county? And that can be in the form of a grant from any department. If you received a grant from our police department to do like a national night out, that counts. If you received something larger from, like, let's say our housing and community development department. So we're going to need to know which department you got the funds from, how much, and what the name of that program was. Then we're going to come to project information in the application. So we're going to need a lot of details. And so we're asking you, to be as explicit as possible. We're going to need it for each project. We're going to need a detailed overview. So a very complete description of what it is you intend to do. A very detailed project budget. Every single thing that goes into this, we need to know. And all of the budget information you can send to us as an Excel sheet if you feel comfortable with Excel, or a Word doc if you feel comfortable with that. We're going to need to know detailed project timelines, including a reporting schedule. So we are going to want you to be very, very detailed in how you plan to undergo your project. So, 6 months, we will sign a lease on a space for a food pantry, and at this date we will receive like the refrigerators for our perishable goods, and at this date we will receive our shelf stable items. At this date we will do an assessment to see what products we have and what we need to replace. We need to be as detailed as possible. We're also going to need a description of your project performance measures. So inputs, outputs, outcomes. There is some explanation for what we're looking for in the application if you need, if you're not sure what we mean by inputs, outputs, and outcomes. So we want to know, what are your inputs? We are going to, buy this many freezers for our food pantry. We are going to, get this space for our food pantry. Our outputs, we're going to move this much, food per week. We're going to, provide food for this many families a month. Your outcomes, again, things like we're going to reduce, food insecurity in this community. So we want to be very, very, very specific in all of this, and there will be plenty of space in the application for you to explain what all of this is. And then we want to know a project management plan. We want to know who and your team is going to manage every aspect of the project and how. This person will handle the tracking of finances. This person will oversee purchases for the food pantry. This person will, handle communications to the community. This person is a case worker, and so on and so forth. We need to be very, very specific for each project. So if you're submitting 3 projects in your application, you will need to provide this information for all 3. If you're submitting one project, it's just for, information for the one project. If you are applying for more than one project, but you only submit information for one, then that's the only one we can consider. And we reserve the right, obviously, to grant you an award for 1, 2, 3, or none of your projects. So if you have submitted a pre-proposal, we have deemed you eligible to submit an application. That is not an automatic guarantee that you will receive funds. If you are submitting 1, 2, 3 projects, we can, fund 1, we can fund 2, we can fund 3, we can fund none. So there's not a guarantee at this process that you will get funding. And if your information is incomplete, we can't consider your project. So after the applications come in, they will be given to Baltimore County. We, the county, will be reviewing all of the applications to confirm that they're complete. All of your information is there. The minimum thresholds, you've provided details for your project, for all of your projects that you're submitted. And then we will evaluate them in the county. We will have an evaluation team comprised of several individuals in the county who have plenty of experience with giving out county grant dollars. So we will evaluate them. And then once we have decided who will receive an award, Baltimore Community Foundation will notify all of those receiving an award and handle, giving you your grant agreement to sign, and then processing your award dollars. So the funds will be distributed in November of 2022. Again, they have to be obligated by the end of 2024, and they have to be spent by 2026. Obligated means you have to have committed to exactly what you will be using them for. Spent means they have to be spent completely. And anything that is not spent comes back to the county, and we give it back to the federal government. And then there will be regular reporting due to Baltimore County. And these are federal guidelines for the reporting, which Gabby is going to talk about in just a minute. And then we as a county are also going to require a final narrative report. So we're going to want to report in 2025, which, should you receive an award, we will make sure that you are notified well in advance of the January 31st, 2025 deadline that you need to submit this particular report. But we're going to want a narrative report, just identifying what, you received from the county in this process, what you did with your money, what were the successes and challenges in implementing your projects, and what you see in the Baltimore County community as an outstanding need. So if you have received COVID-19 funding from us in the past, this is what we've asked of awardees for the past 2 years, so you should be familiar with it. And again, I will provide you plenty of opportunity and notification that is coming. So I'm going to go ahead and shift to Gabby. Gabby's going to talk about the required reporting. And this is ongoing reporting that is going to be due to us for us to then give to the federal government. So Gabby, if you wanted to go ahead and jump in.
Perfect. Yeah, it's time for everyone's favorite part of any grant, award, or agreement or information, the reporting. So there are 2 reports that are going to be submitted on a regular basis, that are required on a regular basis. The first is the project and expenditure report. That is fairly self-explanatory. That would be explaining what the projects funded are, what your expenditures are, contracts, project status, And if you receive an award that is equal or greater to $50,000, it will require more detailed information on that as well. And then that one is due quarterly, and we'll get into the timelines in just a minute. And then the recovery plan performance report is due annually. And that is a way for both Baltimore County and the federal government to better understand the projects that you are undertaking or planning to undertake within the program funding and how you're ensuring that those program outcomes are achieved in an effective, efficient, and equitable manner. It will include things like key performance indicators, as well as that are identified by Baltimore County, as well as some mandatory indicators identified by the Treasury. Now, we do have this note at the bottom here, and I do want to really highlight this, that the U.S. Treasury is continuing to update their compliance and reporting guidance as these funds are being released. So we will adjust our requirements accordingly, and we also encourage you to take a look at the U.S. Treasury's website, which Ashley will be pulling up some information here at the end on their final rule and their compliance and reporting guidance for the most up-to-date information.
So this is just, we will put this in the chat, this link here, but this is the compliance and reporting guidance from the US Treasury that Gabby is referencing. It's very long, it's probably very boring. I'm not going to go through it here. You are welcome to do that on your own.
And I can go ahead and copy that into the chat here because I have that prepared. Or apologies, it looks like I can send this to Ashley and she can share it with everybody else.
Sorry, I'm having tech issues. Okay, I'm back. Here you go, Gabby.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so as we said, these are reports that are going to be due regularly. The first is the project and expenditure report. That is due on the last day of each quarter. And then the recovery plan performance report is due 30 days after receiving funding, and then again annually by June 30th. Now, these dates are important because we, as Baltimore County, as Ashley stated earlier, are also going to be having to report back to Treasury on this. So you will notice if you look at Treasury's information that the dates we are giving to you to submit your reports are a month earlier than the deadlines that will be stated within their guidelines. That is because we need this information from you earlier so that we have time to compile our final report that will go to Treasury. And again, as you are reading this information from the Treasury, Baltimore County would be considered the recipient in this, and all of the organizations that are receiving funds are considered subrecipients. So as you're going through, keep those terms in mind for a little bit more clarity while reading the Treasury documents. The last thing that's really important for us to highlight here is that failure to submit reports within 24 hours of the due date may result in forfeiture of funds. And this again is because these are federal funds and we are beholden to several federal requirements when it comes to reporting and deadlines. So it is really important for us that all of these reports are turned in a timely manner so that we can ensure that our reporting to the federal government is done effectively and efficiently. And again, just highlighting a couple things that you're probably going to have to report on. Those are going to be the regular expenditures, any grant-funded hiring and equity impacts, and project outcomes. Treasury, like I said, is continuing to update all of this information. The most recent update, I believe, is from June 17th of this year. So we will continue to give you updates as they become available and are relevant, but we encourage you to also take a look through this information on your own.
And I just want to share that two things. I'm sure we'll get a question soon about, you know, are there templates available for these reports? And the answer to that is we have not provided them yet, just because, as Gabby said, the requirements are changing and have changed several times from the U.S. Treasury. So once you know, once they are made available and we have, you know, figured out how we want to use them with our reporting and figure out what we want, how we want our awardees to complete them. We'll make those templates available on our website so people can take a look at them. You know, if you're an awardee, you'll obviously be given copies of them. But as soon as I said, as soon as we you know, get some more guidance and we figure out how we want to structure the information in the most efficient way, we will make those templates available to you. And I also wanted to say that the reporting speaks to, again, why this is a two-step process and why we are really kind of hammering in this idea about eligibility and, you know, federal guidelines, is because there are just a lot of requirements that come with this federal money. You know, this is just, I feel like every year we give out our COVID dollars for nonprofits, the rules get stricter and stricter. This, you know, again, federal dollars, we want to make sure that you as a potential awardee are very aware of, you know, what you're going to be required to do after you get the money. You're going to have to be doing some regular reporting. You're going to have to be keeping very, very thorough records. Or, you know, you risk having to forfeit all of your funds back to the federal government. So we want to just, you know, we are trying to make sure that we have made that clear to you so you know what you're getting into as you apply. And we are also trying to make sure that, you know, we are distributing the money in a way that will do the most good for all of the organizations and not put anyone at risk of having to forfeit funds and then, you know, not be able to complete the good work that you do in Baltimore County. Before we go to Q&A, hold on one second. Before we go to Q&A, I just want to mention we have the pre-proposal questionnaire, as many of you may have seen, available in Spanish. And we do have the application, the full application, available in Spanish as well. So Juliana Valencia Banks is our Immigration Affairs Outreach Coordinator for Baltimore County, and she is bilingual. So we have put her contact information here. If you require any Spanish language support, you are free to reach out to her. You are more than welcome to email Gabby and me at GRSI Partners with any questions that you have. We, you know, this isn't just an info at web email address. We are monitoring it and responding to people in real time throughout the day, throughout this whole process. So if you require some support from us, or for whatever reason you can't get in touch with Juliana, or you have lost her email address, you are welcome to email us. We will put you in touch with her and she can provide assistance as needed. That being said, I do want to highlight that we do have the application materials available in Spanish. However, going forward, should you receive an award, subsequent reporting materials and legal documents will have to be completed in English, for purposes of, you know, legal, so on and so forth, and for going back to the U.S. Treasury. So we have done our best to make this accessible to Spanish speakers, but we do just want to highlight that going forward, should you receive an award, once you start having to fill out those reports and sign legal documents, those must be completed in English. And then again, one more thing before I open it up to Q&A. This is the Treasury's final rule. Again, as you can see, it's 437 pages. It's very long, it's very dry, but we have links to this on the web page, the grants web page, so you can link out to it. If you don't, you know, you can't find it on the web page, you can email us. This is where we are taking our guidance. This is the Treasury's guidance on how we're going to use this money, what is authorized, what is allowed, how it, you know, needs to be reported on, when people have to spend it by, and so on and so forth. So this is where all of the information for this lives from the feds. I just wanted to familiarize everyone with it so you can say you've seen it. And again, if you know, want to read it on your own time, or you need to browse through it, we do have a link to this in a few places on our grants webpage, and we can always send it to you as well. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to attempt to unmute all of our attendees so we can open it up to Q&A, and then we can sort of take questions from the chat.
We do have a couple questions in the chat right now, Ashley. So would you
Sure.
like to start with me just kind of reading those off?
Sure.
So we'll start, there's some in the chat and some in the Q&A. I'm going to start off with the ones in the Q&A. I see 7 here right now, and then we'll jump to the ones that are in the chat. So would an Excel budget or P&I suffice for the year-to-date financials?
I will have to double check on the year to date. That is a good question.
And don't worry, we are keeping track of all these questions that we'll follow up on, as Ashley said, and we'll update our FAQ page as appropriate. All right.
Okay.
Next one is, when you ask if the organization was ever delinquent in submitting grant reporting, does that apply to federal grants only?
No, that applies to any grant. So if you have ever been delinquent in submitting a grant report, we are asking you to please, say yes and explain why. Just saying yes is not necessarily going to deem you ineligible. But we have provided you a space to sort of explain what happened because we understand that, there are different situations and different circumstances. So the question is applicable not just to federal awards. The same thing is true for have you ever had to return all or a portion of an award? That is not just for federal awards, that is for any award. And again, with that question, we have provided you with space to sort of explain. So we are just asking that as you fill out those questions, you be detailed and honest so that we can, make sure that we are being as thorough as possible.
Would the fact that we received ARPA and or BCF funding affect our eligibility to receive this grant?
No. So if you have received COVID-19 financial support from the county in the past, you are no less eligible than anyone else this go around. We will look at organizations who maybe were left out last year because we did have an address restriction due to the state funding, but we have not explicitly decided that if you have received prior COVID funding, you are ineligible or less eligible.
How many applications do you anticipate funding?
That's a very good question. We typically, in past years, we had about $2 million last year, and we were able to fund about 60 to 70 applications. So I think it just depends on what people are asking for. We don't have a maximum request amount this year. We only have a minimum. So we have $1.3 million at this time to give out.
You mentioned the deadline for the pre-proposal and a due date for the application. Do you have an idea when organizations will be notified or invited to apply? Looking to understand how long we'll have to prepare the application.
So we are attempting to have all of the organizations notified of whether or not they can submit a full application by the first week in August. The intent there is to give everyone about a month to complete a full application. So the pre-proposal questionnaire and information will come back to us on July 25th. And then we will communicate with BCF, and our intention is for you to know whether or not you can submit a full application that first week in August.
And I'll just add on there that on our webpage, we do have a timeline posted as well that has some of this detailed information. You offered some examples for funding, but could you clarify whether funds can be used to support staff retention?
Let me circle back with our ARPA team in the county about that one. Our intention for this grant is to fund projects that benefit the community in Baltimore County. So let me circle back on whether or not the funds can be used for staff retention, and then we will update our FAQs by the end of next week, and we'll address that question at that time.
Is there assistance and guidance in other languages?
Not at this time, unfortunately. We are only able to provide English and Spanish for the pre-proposal and the application.
Okay, and give me 1 second to jump into the chat to go through those questions. All right, can we use this funding for salary? I think that's similar to the retention question, but a little bit different.
We we will get back to everybody when it comes to salaries and staff retention. Again, the intent of the funds is to provide, um, a service to the county, that, oh, I'm getting word that salary is eligible. We will clarify exactly what that means. Our chief of ARPA policy just chimed in to say that salary is eligible. Salary is eligible for staff working the proposed projects. So if part of your proposed project it involves hiring or redeploying your existing staff to work on the project, that salary is eligible. And again, we will clarify this in the FAQ explicitly.
All right. Would an organization that serves immigrant communities or communities in Essex have a better chance at receiving funding than an organization that is just offering services to Baltimore County residents?
Can you say that one more time? Would a group
Yeah,
of
let me
Essex-
try to rephrase it. So basically, would an organization serving immigrant communities or communities in Essex have a higher priority of being funded or a better chance of being funded than an organization that is offering just general services to Baltimore County?
I'm going
That
to
was
chime in. That's not the kind of question we can answer, but I will note that we have allowed multiple applications from an organization that are directed to those areas. But we're not going to be able to speculate on that kind of question, either now or in any FAQs.
I think this maybe it might be similar, Elizabeth. So will you prioritize organizations that were not awarded county COVID-19 funding last year?
We answered that question already. If you have received COVID-19 funding from us in previous years, you are not ineligible or any less eligible.
Gabby, I'm sorry. I want to chime in now.
Yeah,
Now I'm a
please.
panelist, so apologize everyone. I had joined in the wrong format. So I'm Jasmine Clemens. I'm the Chief of Policy and Recovery Impact. So crux of my job is centered around ARPA funding, understanding the Treasury guidance, and compliance. So just to jump back to the questions about salary and employee retention and things like that. So the purpose of this fund or this venture is to fund projects and opportunities in the county. So not like general operating, but for specific projects that align with, the outline COVID impact on the community. So general retention, that wouldn't be eligible because that's not a project that or a directed need for the county residents to benefit from. However, if you propose a project that obviously will have administrative and staff needs and time dedicated to that, yes, that's eligible because staffing and those are administrative costs related to operating the project. So those would be eligible, similarly to any other grant that you all would apply for when you're charging the time back. So just want to make a distinction there. So general retention, no. Now, if you get this a grant and you want to keep someone that may be funded by another grant, that is eligible because they'd be working on this project. So I hope that provides some clarity. It's standard for how all grants are kind of operating, how you build the time and the administrative need.
And I will just add real quick, in a related capacity, I know in previous years we've made funding available to cover lost revenue that, for the organizations impacted by COVID-19. That is not an eligible expense this year. So this, as Jasmine said, this is about funding projects in Baltimore County. So we are looking to make sure that the projects you propose have a direct benefit to residents of Baltimore County.
We have 3 more, it looks like, in the chat here. So my organization is a 501c4, but we have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor that works with us. When we fill out the questionnaire, should the 501c3 sponsor information be the only information inputted, or is it a combination of the sponsor and our organization?
I think we're going to have to take that one offline, but appreciate the asking clarification on that, and we will respond.
And we had a question here, when is the questionnaire due? That is on the 25th of this month, July 25th. Do we have to have had financial losses due to the COVID-19 pandemic? And I assume that means to be eligible for funding.
No, you do not have to have suffered losses to be eligible. Again, this is about funding projects taking place in the community. So, you know, it's your application as it relates to the project will be looked at based on its impact in the community. So if you've been doing great and you have not suffered a loss due to the pandemic and you have a very detailed and you know, well-written and impactful project for Baltimore County, that is fine. That is something we will look at.
Great, we're getting more questions in the chat, so we maybe are just going to continue at this format. Perfect. Can you say more about the requirements for capital projects?
So let me.
I can jump in if you'd
Oh,
like.
okay, I was
Ashley.
going to pull up the final rule, but you go ahead. I'll put it
Yeah,
in the chat.
so I also want to encourage everyone. The final rule, it's only 500 pages, so at your free time, you should peruse it. But yeah, capital, since once again, we're funding projects, proposals, and not general operating or general improvements for, you know, your nonprofit entities, keep that in mind. So if there is a capital need related to your project, in theory, that should be eligible. So you can outline that in your pre-proposal. I mean, obviously, we're not going to build a whole new office, for instance, for you all, for your organization. That is not a demonstrated, you know, need and purpose of these funds. However, if you needed to, I don't know, make some kind of modification to an existing facility to better serve this population you're going into, that's where capital comes in. So I want you all to think about capital directly related to the projects. You may have capital purchases that you need, and those are generally eligible. But, you know, are we going to build you a new wing? No, that's not the purpose of these funds. I mean, you could make a pitch for it, but that generally wouldn't be eligible in the scope of how we're framing this as a project-based initiative.
Perfect.
Again, yeah, just like I said earlier, you know, if you are providing a community food pantry, so capital expenses related to that would theoretically be eligible, you know, but like Jasmine said, a whole new building would not.
Yeah, and I think that addresses another question that we had here, which is, can you tell me if capital expansion of facilities is allowable? So we had another question here. It sounds like there is no maximum request. Is that correct? Is it possible that the request would only be partially funded?
Yes, we could potentially partially fund a request. We could potentially partially fund, if you have more than one project that you're submitting, we could partially fund all of the ones you submit. We could not fund any. We could fully fund one and partially fund two. The combination is limitless.
Does it have to be a new project, or is it okay to propose a project that we've already been running?
I'm going to let Jasmine answer that one.
Yeah, if it's a project that's been in place, I mean, many of us, the county included, has been doing work in the community since March of 2020, right? So if the sustaining that project, which addresses a COVID-related need, is what you would like to apply for, as long as it's a COVID-related and falls in those other guidelines, it doesn't have to be brand new. Um, the goal of ARPA, right, is to not only help people recover from this ongoing pandemic, but also we're taking this as an opportunity to move people forward. So if there's something you have in place that could be expanded or even continue, that do not think that it has to be brand new. If it works, you have the data and the evidence to support why it's a great initiative to consider for funding.
And then, Gabby, before you go down the list, I have a question that came to me privately. I want to confirm that an organization does not necessarily have to be located in Baltimore County as long as they are serving Baltimore County residents. That is correct. So if you are a nonprofit that is located in the city or Hartford County or, you know, Carroll County, but your project is directly focused on Baltimore County residents, that is fine. So you do not have to be located here.
And those are actually, so far I haven't seen any new questions come through either the Q&A or the chat.
So I have a few more that have come to me privately. So pitch again for retention. COVID indirectly impacted our personnel, required staffing for children at 2-to-1 ratio for youth in some settings in our nonprofit. I can only speculate as to what type of work you do, but if you can make the case that you need to retain your staff for this project that where you're working with children um, due to an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, that may be eligible. If you are have this children staffing ratio, but the project is not related to COVID, it is not eligible. It must be related to COVID-19. And then, can capital needs include technology infrastructure? Yes. Would a project, oh, go ahead, Gabby.
I was going to say I have one if you don't, but go ahead.
Good. I was just saying, would a project that impacts social emotional skill development related to COVID-19 be eligible? It could be an indirect project. We would have to see what that looks like. Jasmine, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, and I want to take this time to encourage folks. So the impact of COVID is expansive and broad and undefined. And that's the goal. ARPA does not define what impact means, right? There's a lot of opportunity for us to explain or dive in and address needs that have emerged. So social emotional skill development, behavioral health, we all know, for instance, children have been impacted by COVID, either through deaths, through quarantine, through all of that. So providing those supports, right, would be an eligible expense. Children that have not benefited from social interactions, right, due to changes to how society has had to function. Going back to social emotional skill development, as long as you can connect the project, the outcomes, the desired goals to a problem or issue that has been exacerbated or shown up or been discovered because of what we've gone through, the argument that it's eligible is there. So just to answer these eligibility questions, if we do this kind of projects, I want to encourage you all to know that you have an opportunity to demonstrate that for us because there's latitude.
Can we include indirect costs in our budget request?
Indirect costs are federally available. We can get in the weeds of that as we move into the actual, if you're selected, because you have to go by what is your negotiated rate or de minimis, things like that. So indirect costs are eligible under federal guidance, and for the grantees, that's something we would dive into if you move forward.
Those are all of the questions I have from the chat and the Q&A. Ashley, I don't know if you had any more that came directly to you.
I don't have any more that came directly to me. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to attempt to unmute everybody. And then I would just ask that you jump in with your. Oh.
Now we gotta go on an adventure.
That was not a good idea. I don't know that I'm going to be able to unmute people individually. I think go ahead and continue to add your questions to the chat. We are going to stay on and make sure everybody's questions have been answered. So please feel free. Oh, here we go.
Have one here. Can a private school apply?
If you are a 501c3 nonprofit or you have a 501c3 fiscal sponsor.
And application score is based on a uniform set of criteria. Will applicants know what the criteria are?
The criteria, so again, we're looking for your threshold eligibility with the pre-proposal questionnaire, and then we are looking to make sure in your application that you have provided detailed, thorough budgets, outlines of what you intend to do, who is going to manage it, who is going to oversee every aspect. Does it affect and address the COVID-19 pandemic directly or indirectly? Does it, affect and benefit residents of Baltimore County. Those are the general criteria. As we move forward, we can look at some more specific criteria that we can make available to people.
Nonprofits are generally advised not to apply for an amount that is larger than 20% of its total budget. Is that a general rule that we should follow for these funds?
Jasmine.
I mean, I can chime in based on best practices. Yes, I think we didn't set a limit intentionally because one, you may have an example or you may be in negotiations of something, right, that is larger than that, but you will have the outside support. You'll have braided sources of funds. We know that nonprofits and are many are getting large donations, grants related to this work, right? So you could be building something that's larger than you typically do, but if you show that you have the supports in place to be good fiscal stewards and actually execute, that's why we did not want to limit, because there's a lot of opportunity here to braid with other funds and other initiatives you may have going on. But to that point, if you are a small nonprofit and you're making up a number, your annual revenue is your annual budget is $100,000, an ask of $300,000 for a project, we would be questioning the capacity of the organization to execute and spend that money and be the fiscal steward. So keep that in mind.
That is the last question I see that has come through. So
I have a few that came to me. Let me see here. Is there a date requirement for the good standing certificate? We are asking that as of the time that you apply, you are in good standing with the state. So that is why a screenshot, like I showed you before, is acceptable as a submission for your certificate. We want to make sure that as of the time that you apply, you are in good standing. So if you were in good standing 3 years ago, but you aren't now, that would not make you eligible to continue on and submit a full application. And then fiscal year started July 1, pre-proposal questionnaire would not require fiscal 23 financials. Correct. That is correct.
looks like we have another one in the Q&A here. Give me 1 second so I can see all of it. Does this mean that any 501c3 can apply for the funds as long as projects and services are implemented in the county? So it is not necessary for these organizations or services and projects to be located in ARPA areas. Is that correct? I'm not certain what you mean by ARPA areas.
I'm not sure what you mean by ARPA areas. I think if you want to email us at GRSI Partners, I'll put that email back up if you want to explain a little bit more what it is you mean. I don't know that we can answer that question. Okay, I've just got a bunch that came into me. Let me go
and we just got one in the chat as well, so.
Go ahead.
Okay, give me 1 second here. I asked the earlier question of whether nonprofits who were not awarded county COVID-19 funding would be prioritized this time around, but the answer given answered the inverse of my question. No, if you received COVID-19 funding, your application would not be negatively impacted. Is this inverse true? If you did not receive prior COVID-19 funding, would your application be viewed more positively or prioritized?
I'm going to answer that only to say that we're not answering it. And here's why. Each round of funding has had its own requirements, some of which we couldn't change. So it's not like every funding stream was just county money and we were making decisions and those who were left out are deserving. There were lots of other requirements, especially with the last round, which came from the state and required that you be located in the county and that you hadn't received all kinds of other funding streams. So what we're going to do is ask, as Ashley has outlined and is on the webpage, everything you've received from the county proper, whether it was COVID related or not, as well as other COVID support, and make decisions accordingly. And that's why we've not referenced preferences or priorities in our rollout of this because there's so many factors that we're going to take into consideration. So that's where we are on that general preference question.
And if I can just add one more thing, I know criteria was brought up. Elizabeth just alluded to, we're looking at everything individually. We really do want to make sure that, we give funds to applications that are very, very well thought out, well stated, organized. Your projects have all of the inputs and outputs, and, you have clear budgets. The more detailed and thorough your projects are presented to us, the better, because that having an awardee have to return funds to us to then go back to the federal government is something we want to avoid, and we know you want to avoid. And obviously, if you have to do that, it is going to hinder your operations and the good work that you are doing in the county. So we really do want to see, above all things, and not to the exclusion of, we want to see a very thorough, detailed, and explicit project description.
And we have one more here really quick before you jump into yours, since it is an easy one. Do we already have to have a location in the county to apply? No, you do not. You just need to be serving Baltimore County residents with your project.
Okay, I have a few that came to me privately. When would this funding be distributed, and what fiscal year does this apply to? I see that funds have to be spent by the end of 2024. The funds will be distributed in November of 2022, and they need to have been obligated by the end of calendar year 2024 and spent completely by the end of calendar year 2026. So there are a few fiscal years at play there. Those are the dates that came from the U.S. Treasury. So those are the dates that we are bound to when it comes to spending the money and obligating the money. So that's in the U.S. Treasury's final rule, which you can take a look at if you are interested. But the money needs to be completely, spent by the end of calendar year 2026. Let me see here. Will this be recorded, and the slides, will they be available later? Yes. So we are recording right now. We will make this presentation available on our website and BCF's website, as well as a PDF of these slides. So you will be able to access this later. Can the fund be used for hiring a consultant to build capacity? We will have to get back to you on that. Unless Jasmine is still on, I would tee up that one to Jasmine.
Yeah, I can quickly chime in. So once again, that'd be more in the line of an operating kind of grant. So no, but if it's course of your project that you want to build out, long-term capacity building is important. Maybe you can build it into that. But I think a general capacity building deviates from the purpose of these funds. So I do want to apologize that I cannot stay on. I do have a conflicting meeting, but if there are any more eligibility type questions, Ashley will communicate back with us, and we'll make sure that it's in the updated FAQ, so that way everyone has the same answer available.
Thank you, Jasmine. And like she said, anything that we cannot address during the Q&A portion, we will get answers to, and we'll put them in an updated FAQ so that they will be there for everybody. I have another question. Can you clarify the definition of a federal award? We receive Title III funding through local jurisdictions and SNAP outreach funding. So yes, so we want to know basically what money you get from the federal government. It does not have to be a competitive one-time grant. We want to know if you get regular funding from the federal government. I'm sure that some of you that are on the call, have potentially received homeless services or public services funds from the county, and are familiar with sort of how that pass-through might work. So, if they are federal dollars and they are something, formula funds or a competitive fund, we want to see that you have experience with, the ins and outs and the rules and reporting that come with getting federal dollars. So again, doesn't have to be a competitive grant. And then I think I have another private question. this is to everybody, where on the HUD website is the Qualified Census Tract tool? I will have to, I can pull that up, but it will take me a minute. So I think what might be easier is just to put that into the FAQ, so that you can, follow the link to that information. If we are planning to update the FAQs by the end of next week. So if that is not timely enough for you, you are welcome to email GRSI partners, and I will put that information back on the screen before we hang up so you have it. You can email us and I'll directly send you the hyperlink, but we'll include that in the FAQs going forward so everyone can just click on it from our website.
And we've got one more question in the Q&A here. Does having match funding make the proposal more competitive?
That is going to be a question much like the eligibility question, which I don't want to necessarily answer because, again, we're looking at the impact and the thoroughness of the proposals and how they, address the impacts of COVID in the county. So I can't really give you a good answer there, and we don't really want to necessarily commit to an answer there.
All right, those are the last questions I see in the Q&A, in my private, and in the all attendees.
I have one more that just came to me. The federal funding, is it COVID related or in general do we receive? What about state funding not COVID related? Is that something you would want to know? I think you're referring to the application stage, not the pre-proposal, but let me just address both. So in the pre-proposal questionnaire, we do have a question about, have you ever received federal funding? That is a yes or no question, or federal award. That's a yes or no question, the pre-proposal questionnaire. And then in the application, we ask you to list your COVID related funds. So if you have received COVID-19 support from the federal government, the state, a foundation. We ask you to submit your Baltimore County financial support that's not just COVID related. If you've received any other kind of grant from Baltimore County. So I hope that answers your question. Without any more clarification, I'm not really sure, but those are the different opportunities to address that in the pre-proposal and the application.
Nothing more has come through, so I want to give folks another minute or so if you have any other questions to submit or ask us during our Q&A.
We will, we'll continue to be here. I see some people are dropping off. So thank you very much for joining us. We will continue to stay on until everyone is gone and we've answered all questions, and then we will share this material online. And please, like I said, feel free to email us. I'm going to go ahead and just put the email addresses back up on the screen. Let me see here. As people are disappearing and not asking questions, I just want to again say thank you everyone for attending. I hope this was helpful. You can email us at any time with questions. We'll do our best to help you as much as possible. So feel free to ask. Feel free to check our website. The link to the grant program's webpage is here on the slide. Thank you so much. All right, I am going to go ahead and stop recording. It looks like we've got a pretty solid ending here to our stream of questions.